Hello and welcome. He's been one of the world's leading diplomats, flown into trouble zones as the special envoy of the United Nations Secretary General, and always speaking his mind. As a young man, he left his studies in Paris to join Algeria's War of Liberation and grew to become one of the country's most respected figures. This week on One on One, meet international diplomat and peace negotiator Lakhdar Brahimi. Born to a wealthy family south of Algiers in 1934, the young Lakhdar Brahimi was educated in Algeria and France. It was during his time in Paris that the War of Independence began back home, prompting him to leave his studies and join the Liberation Front. He was soon fast-tracked into a diplomatic career, representing the independence movement overseas while still in his 20s. Brahimi went on to become Algeria's foreign minister in the early 90s and served the United Nations in Haiti and South Africa, before being appointed in 2001 as UN Secretary General Kofi Annan's special representative to Afghanistan and Iraq, where his reputation for being very direct put him at odds with American foreign policy. The veteran diplomat officially retired from his duties at the end of 2005, but is still quietly called upon for his skills and expertise. Ambassador, great to have a chance to chat with you.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
It's a pleasure. Now, there's a difference between politics and diplomacy. You've sort of crossed the ground across both. What do you see yourself as primarily?
Probably more of a diplomat, but very much a third world kind of diplomacy that I have practiced, where, as you said, the border is not very clear between politics and I think one of the words they used to say was committed diplomacy.
Now, considering the front lines you've had to handle and some of the major tasks you've had to undertake, would you consider yourself a peacemaker?
Yeah, I think I have been, or I've tried to be a peacemaker in the last few years in my career. Since the mid-80s until now, actually, I have done more, I've dealt more with conflicts, post-conflict situations, than with either bilateral or other type of multilateral diplomacy. So, yeah, perhaps I can claim to be a kind of peacemaker, yes.
Now, I know you've been quoted as saying that peacemaking is a long-term endeavor with a great deal of disappointment.
Sure.
And so a lot of disappointments for you along the way?
Sure, absolutely. Sometimes you feel like giving up, and sometimes you do give up. When I was in Afghanistan in 1999, that particular time there was the Taliban who controlled 90% or more of Afghanistan, were planning another offensive. And we tried to beg them that it was not necessary. You will just kill a little bit a little more of your people. You will destroy a little bit more of your country and agriculture and so on. That's all you will do. And you will not be that better off. But they didn't listen. The people who were supporting them did not listen. So I went back to the Security Council and said, look, I have done everything I know. And I haven't got anywhere. In my conscience, I have got to tell you that I have to leave. And if you want me to tell you why I want to leave because you are not supporting me. And I left. Mm-hmm.
So you have a threshold, of course, where you are willing to walk away. Now, of course, the United Nations has its own issues and its own problems. As an insider, someone who knows the workings very well, how do you judge the United Nations? How do you see how it's evolved since its inception?
It has had its ups and downs, but all in all, I think it has done rather well. And the other thing is that there is nothing better than the United Nations. There is nothing that can do what the United Nations can do. Lately, I think that they probably have lost quite a little bit of their credibility, in my judgment, unnecessarily. And I think it is terribly important that the United Nations does what needs to be done to regain that credibility.
What about the Arab League and the sense of Arab unity? That's another area you've had to deal with. It seems there's
Yes.
no real kind of unity there.
No, no, unfortunately there isn't. I think the Arab world is also going through a very, very bad spell. There is no sense of direction collectively. I think they have lost that kind of drive, that kind of inspiration, that kind of hope. Why? It's probably too long to discuss. Are they going to get it back? I really don't know.
Let me take you back to early years. You were born into a wealthy family living just south of Algiers. Now, what are your earliest memories of that time, growing up in that era pre-World War II?
We were in a very rather isolated part of the country, very conservative environment, Arab, Muslim. I think my memories are of, I think it would be too much to say of a changing world, but it was definitely a changing world for me because my father died when I was very young, 10 years, and then we moved house. And for a child, that is more important than the end of the Cold War. So growing up there, moving from this isolated, secluded area to, at the age of 14 or 15, to the lights of Algiers, to French language, was a very, very big change. That was the end, not before the Second World War, just after the end of the Second World War, and opening one's eyes to nationalism, to perhaps it wasn't called clash of civilization, but it was certainly a clash of some kind that ended up in the War of Liberation.
Now, you had a pretty solid education in law and political science in Algeria and in Paris, but you left a year before graduation to join your country's War of Liberation and Independence. Now, while studying, you helped to found the Algerian Student Union.
Yeah.
What do you recall about that time and the nationalist sort of ideas that came?
I think some of the important moments were precisely the end of the secondary school in Algiers, where all of us, all our generation, choose the irreversible way of nationalist struggle. And there were some very strong influences from teachers and so on. And then the creation of the student union. There was a very big battle between the nationalists and the communists. We won that battle, and we created this union that later on played a very important role in the sense that many of us ended up at a very, very young age in critical positions, first in the struggle for independence and then in the newly independent Algeria.
What do you think that sort of violent struggle for independence taught you? One lesson, if there was, you learned from that?
I think, one was a sense of solidarity and even brotherhood. I remember thinking of that at those times, that we call one another brothers, X brother Y, and so on. I think we meant that literally because of the violent nature of the struggle, because a lot of us were killed. I think that sense of solidarity was extremely, extremely strong. And also, when you look back at it from now, from this old age, then you see how incredibly sure of ourselves we were. I'm sometimes embarrassed to think how sure we were of being right, of knowing everything and so on, whereas we didn't know everything. As a matter of fact, we knew very little. But this is, the arrogance of youth, plus, probably the added arrogance of being involved in a struggle like that.
You proved yourself to be a very able political and diplomatic player at a very early age when you joined the National Liberation Front, the FLN, when the War of Independence for Algeria started in 1954. Now, you were sent to Jakarta, Indonesia, as the representative. Again, only 21 years old. That must have been quite
22.
22. Okay, close. So it must have been quite tough, though, for a young man. Like
yeah, but this is what I mean. When I look back now, I am ashamed to say that that I was talking to Sukarno, to Tengku Abdurrahman in Malaysia, to Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore, before I was 25. I'm embarrassed now. I don't remember what I was telling these people. But in those days, I think, I was speaking on behalf of the people of my country, on behalf of my country, with an embarrassingly big feeling of self-confidence and of knowing what I was saying and what I was doing.
I've got many more questions for you. Just going to take a short break here. We're back with more one-on-one in a moment.